Hello, friends. It's Raquel back with your forecast for the upcoming new moon in Gemini, which is happening here on the Pacific Coast on Saturday, June 17th at 9:37 p.m., which means it'll be more like June 18th for those on the East Coast and other places of the world. So check your times and you'll know whether the new moon is on the 18th of June or the 17th of June for you. But let's get into the energies of this upcoming new moon in Gemini. So let's start off a little bit with Gemini itself. Gemini is a mutable air sign. Air signs always represent our thoughts, our communication, but really our minds and the way that we're thinking. Mutable signs are adaptable. In fact, mutable signs typically really love change. And the theme that really arose for me with this new moon in Gemini, as I was feeling into the energies, it was really about the power of changing our minds and how, when we actually allow ourselves to change our minds and change our thoughts, we actually liberate and free our minds as well. And it's kind of interesting because while this is a new moon and new moons are about planting new seeds and manifestation and kind of getting things started fresh and new again, there is a little bit of energy with this particular new moon in Gemini that feels a little bit like a full moon in the way that it kind of illuminates certain things within us that maybe perhaps we want to look at changing. So let's get into it. All right. So when I felt into the energies of this new moon in Gemini in particular, there was almost this kind of energy of like seeking, of just wanting to find the answers, wanting to get to the point and get to some kind of conclusion and just kind of get everything that we've been wanting and searching for. But it feels like a little bit shadowy in that desire. And it feels like the desire is actually pushing us away from the clarity that we're actually seeking. So let's talk a little bit more about Gemini, the sign, some of the great things about Gemini. Gemini is incredibly curious and inquisitive. Gemini is sociable and communicative. Gemini often will look at different perceptions or perspectives on the same thing. So Gemini can at times be very open-minded and open to new perceptions and new perspectives. On the shadow side of Gemini, sometimes all those perspectives and perceptions can actually lead to almost an overwhelm of opportunity or an overwhelm of ideas. Gemini energy can also be quite distracted and a bit impatient. And then there is also that energy of just kind of overthinking, over processing, over analyzing, and kind of getting to that point where you kind of just are like thinking through every last little detail to the point where you kind of want to pull your hair out. That can be a little bit of the shadow side of Gemini as well. So, a practice that came through as really powerful, potent, and important for this particular new moon is to really be able to focus in on and discern between the emotions that are arising within us that are mind made, are thought generated, versus the emotions that we feel that are actually from the heart and from our soul. And that actually is not always a very easy thing to do. And I think I've shared a little bit about this in previous videos. But again, there was a really big focus with this new moon in learning to discern between our own emotions. Because let's remember, the moon always represents our emotional selves, our emotional bodies, our subconscious, and just how we are as emotional beings. That is what the moon represents. And when we have this particular new moon in Gemini, we're kind of being, we're facing really the duality of our emotions because Gemini is represented by the twins, and Gemini really does speak to the duality of the human experience, whether you call the dual voices inside the ego versus the soul, or the higher self versus the lower self, or the inner critic versus the inner cheerleader, whatever terms you use for it, Gemini really does represent those two voices that often play within our minds, one that tell us that we're like awesome and great, and the other voice that tells us that we suck and we can never get this straight, or whether that's a personal thing or the world at large. Those two voices, those are the twins. That's what Gemini represents. And with this new moon in Gemini, we might feel a lot of emotions bubble to the surface that some of them might be from our heart and from our soul, but a lot of them, a lot of the emotions that we're probably going to be first feeling, especially on the surface level with this new moon, are going to be emotions that are generated by our thinking minds. And it's very, very easy for us to believe the mind and the thoughts the mind creates and the emotions that then arise from those thoughts. But sometimes our job is to actually not believe those thoughts. And sometimes our job is to learn how to transform those thoughts into emotions that are actually led by our heart, and being able to feel into the emotions that are separate from our thoughts. And that is a practice that takes some time. And in my moon blog that I share, I actually walk you through a practice that I do almost on a daily basis to help me get below the surface of my emotions, which tend to typically be my thought driven emotions, down deeper below those emotions, down deeper into the emotions that are from my heart and soul. And the way I do that is actually through the sacral chakra. I've shared about this before. I'll put some links in the notes where you can learn a little bit more about the practice I do to get into the sacral chakra, to really connect with my soul-led and my authentic emotions, because that's a really powerful practice, especially for this new moon, but really at any time. At any time, it's a really powerful practice. So I'll be sure to share that here. Now, another thing I wanted to share with you all that I'm really excited about is that for the blog for this month, for this new moon in Gemini, I actually called upon a dear friend of mine who's also a past client who is currently studying astrology. And she is now going to be adding in some astrology around the lunation, around the moon that we're in, so that we have kind of a bigger picture of what's going on with the moon. Because as I've explained to you all, I'm not an astrologer. I love astrology. I love learning about it, but I'm not an astrologer. I feel in intuitively into the energies of the moon that is coming, and I share with you what I receive. So I'm really excited about this collaboration because we are bringing an astrologer on board to share a little bit more about some of the other things that are happening up in the heavens, some of the more of the celestial influence that might be impacting us during any of the particular moons. So for this particular new moon in Gemini, we have a lot of influence from Mercury, which is the planet of communication, and Mercury actually rules Gemini. So there's some positive aspects there. And then we also have some influence from Neptune that might lead us to feel a little bit more overwhelmed and a little bit more confused with this new moon in particular. So if you want to learn a little bit more about the astrology of this new moon, please visit my moon blog. I'm going to put the link below, and you'll see that beautiful collaboration from Melissa at The Real Mindset Maven, where she shares a little bit more about the astrology of this particular lunation. But let me go back and talk a little bit about this new moon in Gemini, because as I mentioned earlier, new moons are about manifestation, about new beginnings, about planting seeds, about creating intentions. But this new moon, the energy feels a little different. So I actually don't feel like this is a particularly positive new moon for setting intentions or for manifesting new things. What I really feel is that this is a very powerful new moon for creating or manifesting or transforming thoughts. So it's really about manifesting new supportive thoughts, which will then help us to create more of what we want in life down the road. So not the best moon for necessarily manifesting new abundance or new opportunities or that new car or that new home or whatever it is physically that you might want to be calling in. This is a very powerful new moon for manifesting thought processes and how we're thinking, and especially for working through limiting beliefs, and coming up with new, more supportive stories. This is a very, very powerful new moon for that in particular. All right. So I'm going to leave you all today with just a little bit more information about how you can go about discerning between your mind-made or thought-generated emotions versus your soul-led or heart-led emotions, because I think this is a very powerful practice to utilize, especially for this new moon in Gemini. If you were looking for more details about this new moon, about the astrology of this moon, or if you're looking for some journal prompts for working through the energies of this new moon, please visit my moon blog. I will link it below in the notes here. So check that out and you can follow that to check out the moon blog. And so now let me just talk you through the process I go through to discern between my thought generated emotions and my heart or soul generated emotions. So the first thing I do is I just kind of become aware of what is the emotion that is on the surface for me, what is very present. And in the moon blog, I share a practice I did actually the day I wrote this blog, where I was really connecting with a lot of frustration and impatience within me. So the emotion that's on the surface, the emotion that I really feel that I'm feeling right now, was frustration and a bit of overwhelm. And so what I did is I allowed myself to be very present with that emotion. I actually cried a little bit because I felt like I wanted to cry, and it felt like a good way to kind of release some of the what's the word I'm looking for? Some of the triggering of that emotion, right? So I kind of cried it out a little bit just to kind of get the emotional trigger to move through. And then what I did is I actually just sat quietly. You have to give yourself about 30 minutes to do this practice, 20, 30 minutes. It can only take 10 minutes once you get good at it. But when you're first starting out, give yourself about 20, 30 minutes. So after I just kind of was aware of the emotion that was there, let myself feel it, let myself process it, I sat quietly and I asked myself, where am I feeling this emotion in my body? Where am I feeling it as an energy? It might be in your stomach, it might be in your heart, it might be in your throat, but follow the guidance that your body gives you. Allow yourself to really feel into, where am I holding this emotion? Where am I holding this frustration? Where am I holding this overwhelm, sadness, anger, whatever it is? Check in with your body. Where is this? Place your hands where you're feeling that. And then ask that space within you, that place in your body and that emotion that you're feeling, to tell you more about it. Does it have a shape? Does it have a texture? Does it have a temperature? Does it have a color to it? And really just focus less on what the emotion's feeling like and start getting information about the emotion itself, right? Okay, so this emotion is right here, just kind of above my heart on the left side. It feels like a dark rectangle, almost like a wall. It feels kind of bumpy, and it makes me feel kind of tight, right? So you can kind of get more information about the emotion, right? So once you get that, then you ask that place and that emotion, that energy within you, what do you need? Do you want me to move a certain way? Are there certain words that you want to hear me say to you? Is there a color that you want me to send to you? Or is there certain practice that you need from me? Do you want me to drink more water? Is there a nourishing snack I could eat right now that you could use, right? So just ask this energy, ask this emotion, what do you need? And then do your best to actually give it what it needs in that moment. Once you've worked through that, then you can actually come back to a quiet seated place. Place your hands on your lower abdomen, just below the belly button, and imagine, sorry, excuse me. Imagine as if you could actually miniaturize yourself into a teeny tiny person, like a la Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, and see yourself almost traveling through your belly button into your sacral chakra, into that lower navel area, into that womb space, all right? And just allow yourself to be super present in that space. It might help for you to really focus on the feeling of your hands on your lower abdomen, and then feeling from the lower abdomen, feeling the pressure of your hands on that space. So first feeling your hands on top of your abdomen, and then feeling your abdomen and the hands pressure on the abdomen itself to really get into that space. And once you feel this kind of grounded, anchoring feeling of being within your sacral chakra, you're going to ask your sacral to share with you, what am I really feeling? What am I really feeling from my heart and my soul? And then you're just going to breathe and listen and not try to control anything and not try and navigate where you're going, but just be very present with whatever arises. And typically, the emotion that arises within the sacral is going to feel surprising. It's going to feel different than what your mind is telling you you're feeling, and it's going to feel a little surprising. And that is how you tell the difference between your thought generated emotions and your soul or heart authentic generated emotions. If you have any questions about this, please feel free to leave a comment or to reach out to me on my website or via my Instagram at Infinite Succulent. Thank you so much for watching these moon updates. If you're enjoying this, please subscribe, like, and share, and I'll see you guys again for the next video. Bye, friends.